building a bullpen through free agency isn't generally the smartest way to do it, but for most good teams, you kind of have to do it that way. And that includes the Orioles. So let's take a look at some of the best setup men out there. Coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast.
You are Locked On Orioles, your daily Baltimore Orioles podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Orioles fans. Today is Friday, November 28th, 2025, and welcome back in to the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, I'm your host, Connor Newcomb. And coming up on today's episode, we will continue our Orioles free agent wish list episodes, taking a look at the right-handed relievers who are out there on the free agent market, specifically the high leverage guys, the setup men, the former closers, the guys the O's should sign and from day one would be able to trust if they gave him the ball in the eighth inning of a one-run game. We will bring up some names that you may know very well. We'll also talk about some guys who just recently got into this whole relieving thing. And then maybe my favorite reliever in all of baseball, I've got ranked number one on this list. But that's all coming up on this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast, which is brought to you by GameTime. Download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. So disclaimer, I am recording this episode on Tuesday, November 25th, just due to Thanksgiving and holiday plans. Hopefully everyone's holiday week went well if you're lucky enough to be able to spend it with friends and or family. And maybe you're doing some Black Friday shopping here on a Friday, but wanted to still get you a Thursday and Friday episode, kind of doing a little more previewing of free agency. Because when we get to Monday, the calendar flips to December. We are then a week away from the beginning of the winter meetings. And even though there has certainly, especially in Birdland, been moves already this offseason, when the GMs and everyone get to the winter meetings this year in Orlando in the second week of December, that is when things generally really start to heat up. And when you have a team that all the reporting's been, the Orioles have been one of the more aggressive teams so far this offseason, you would think something is going to go down at those winter meetings. So I want to be prepared by getting all my free agent wish lists out there. I did my left-handed reliever wish list on Thursday's episode, so make sure to go back and check that one out if you have not already. Today we turn to the right-handed relievers. Now I'm going to split righty relievers up into two episodes. This is going to be part one. This is going to be like the established setup guys. These are the pitchers who have pitched in the eighth and ninth innings. You know you can trust in those roles. They've done it plenty of times, and who the O's could get to really help in those spots. Next week, I'm going to do another episode talking about more of the kind of sleeper, under the radar, middle relief types who could still help your bullpen, but maybe not from day one are they in the eighth inning. So let's jump into it again, how these wish list episodes work. I take 6 players from the position, rank them from 6 to 1, not necessarily just in, these are the 6 best relievers, but also factoring in how they fit the Orioles and also what their projected cost will be in free agency and how that fits with the Orioles' plans as well. And number 6 on my list is an old friend. That is 30-year-old right-hander Hunter Harvey, who will turn 31 in December. He's got a 1-year, $6 million contract projection for him this offseason. Most of these coming from John Becker and Fangraphs and the free agent matrices, taking kind of the median of all the projections. Our old friend Hunter has been at least healthier since he left Baltimore. 2022, 2023, 2024. He threw 39, 61, and 51 innings out of the bullpen in those 3 seasons, but he had lat issues. He had an adductor strain. He threw only 10 2/3 innings in 2025 with the Royals, so we are kind of back. Now, he didn't give up a run in those 10 2/3 innings, but we're kind of back to where we were with Hunter Harvey. Now, his fastball velocity was down from 98 to 96 in those 10 2/3 innings. You'd have to think those injuries may have played a role, but during that healthy stretch of 3 years, 22 to 24 with the Nats and the Royals, he had a 3.29 combined ERA with a 27% strikeout rate and a 7% walk rate. It's the four-seamer, splitter, slider, curveball combo. The stuff is pretty good across the board. And Hunter Harvey, when he's healthy, has been a really good relief pitcher who has pitched in a lot of high leverage roles, especially when he got to Kansas City. Now, we know he's not always been healthy, and that's been kind of especially the case since he was traded to the Royals. Like, he was dealt to the Royals at the 2024 deadline, and he has only pitched 16 and a third innings out of the bullpen, 18 games for Kansas City since then, because although he was healthy with the Nats, he started getting hurt again with the Royals. So the O's would have to be fairly confident about the medicals there, and they probably know a lot about Hunter Harvey's medicals, but if they feel he's healthy, he's turned himself into a really good reliever. Number 5 on my list is someone else the Orioles know well for a different reason. That is 32-year-old righty Luke Weaver, who has a 2-year, $18 million contract projection on him for this offseason. The Yankees got Luke Weaver at the end of 2023, and in 2024, they turned him into a reliever. He was a former top prospect, a former first-round pick. He'd been kind of a middling to bad starter for multiple different teams from 2016 all the way through 2023. He had pretty much kept himself in the big leagues for most of those seasons, mostly being a starter, but it never really looked good. Now, there was a little bit of a glimpse in 2022. He pitched for the D-backs and the Royals that season. He made 26 appearances and only 1 start. So he was essentially a full-time reliever. And although he had a 6.56 ERA, he also had a 2.69 FIP that year. And I think teams started to see there might be something here. Now, Cincinnati tried to turn him back into a starter, but once the Mariners and then the Yankees got their hands on him in 2023, I think they said this guy's a reliever. And in 2024, Weaver came out in the bullpen and was incredible. He was a multi-inning guy at times. He threw 84 innings over 62 relief appearances and posted a 2.89 ERA for the Yankees. His strikeout rate jumped up to 31%. His walk rate stayed around 8%, where it's been all his career. Opponents hit just 173 against him that year. And he was one of the better relievers in baseball. I mean, mostly Clay Holmes was the closer for that Yankee team, but Weaver even stepped in and had 4 saves. He was kind of the main setup man, getting the ball to Clay Holmes. Like, he became a legit reliever in that 2024 season. And really what happened was the fastball ticked up. It went from 94 as a starter to 96 as a reliever. That's helpful. His changeup got even better. He threw it even more. It had almost a 50% swing and miss rate. It was basically unhittable for lefties, which allowed him to be good against hitters from both sides of the plate. And then he started to throw this interesting cutter more, which started to get just like really, really soft contact against it. Nobody could square it up. And he kind of became a relief monster. Now, there was some regression that happened in 2025. He still threw 64 games, but he only threw 64 and 2/3 innings. He became basically only a 1-inning guy. His ERA jumped up to 3.62. His FIP jumped as well. We saw a drop in the strikeout rate. The walk rate was the same, but, guys started to hit him a little bit better. And, if you look at the stuff, the raw stuff went down a little bit for Weaver in 2025. There was also a bit of an injury concern. He had a hamstring issue that he came back from really, really quickly and ended up having like a 7+ ERA in July and a 9+ ERA in September. He was really bad down the stretch and honestly kind of fell out of the Yankees bullpen circle of trust as they entered the postseason. Now, it's not like they made a super deep playoff run, but between the wild card series against the Red Sox and then the ALDS against the Blue Jays, like Luke Weaver was used, but not nearly in the way that he was used in 2024. The fastball kind of started getting crushed, even though the changeup was still good. But the fastball still has good vert at 95. The cutter, he kind of backed off of the usage, but it's still an intriguing pitch. Like, getting that cutter back could change him. This could still work. Now, he's reportedly interested in becoming a starter again and being signed as a free agent to go back to a starting pitcher. So we'll see. But if he's willing to still be a reliever, even though it was kind of bad down the stretch, there's still something in there for Luke Weaver. But let's move on to number 4 and 3 on the list coming up next. 2 guys who know pitching in the Mid-Atlantic, DC, Baltimore region very well. We'll get to the next 2 names right after this. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is brought to you by GameTime. The NFL season is back, and honestly, there's nothing better than being in the stadium surrounded by fans and cheering on your team. But let's be honest, getting tickets can be a hassle between queues, login screens, and prices jumping at checkout. It's frustrating. That's why I use GameTime, the app that gives the advantage back to fans. GameTime is fast, it's easy, and it's backed by the GameTime guarantee. You'll always get 100% authentic tickets delivered on time and at the best price. Plus, all fees are included. So the price you see is the price you pay. You can look at GameTime, and as the Ravens are trying to, after a 1-5 start, get to an AFC North title and back to the playoffs, like you can pull up GameTime and find NFL games as low as $100. So download the GameTime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's promo code LOCKEDONMLB for $20 off. Swipe, tap, ticket, go. Download GameTime today. So as we move on our Orioles free agent right-handed reliever wish list in terms of the setup man and the high leverage guys, we move on to number 4 on my list, and that would be Kyle Finnegan, the 34-year-old righty who is projected to get a 2-year, $18 million contract in free agency. Now, Kyle Finnegan has been used as a closer a lot in his career with the Nationals. I don't believe he's a closer, which is why he wasn't on my closer list and is why he's on kind of my setup man list. But Finnegan, who had been with the Nats forever since debuting in 2020 and had really been their closer for most of that time, 11 saves in 21 and 22, then 28 saves in 2023, and then 38 saves in 2024. He wasn't amazing, had about a 3.5 ERA over that 4-year stretch, but stayed remarkably healthy and threw at least 63 innings in each of those 4 seasons and was a guy you could somewhat count on. He wasn't the most dominant reliever in the world, but he was dependable. And he started to get a little worse with the Nats this year. 20 saves, 39 innings. His ERA had ballooned to 4.38. His walk rate had gone up. His strikeout rate had gone down. It was getting a little concerning, but it was still good enough for him to be wanted at the deadline, and the Nats traded him to the Tigers at the deadline. And with the Tigers, he looked like a different pitcher. 16 appearances down the stretch, 18 innings. He did save 4 games, but more importantly, had a 1.50 ERA with a 1.97 FIP. His strikeout rate jumped from 20% with the Nats to 35% with the Tigers. His walk rate somehow dropped from 9 to 6% as well. Opponents hit just 145 against him in Detroit. He was dominant, and he had a shaky outing or two in the postseason with the Tigers, but otherwise, he looked like a different arm, and it makes sense, right? Nats, at least in the old regime before they flipped it all this offseason, not really known for pitching development. So they had an okay, solid closer in Kyle Finnegan. They decided we're not going to change anything. The Tigers got him and immediately said there is a lot more to unlock here, and it took them a week to unlock what the real good version of Kyle Finnegan can be. Now, what he changed is he started throwing significantly more splitters. He used that pitch around 30% of the time with the Nats. He immediately threw it 50% of the time in August with the Tigers and 66% of the time in September. And in August, opponents hit 0.38 with a 51% swing and miss rate against that pitch. There's nothing super unique about his splitter when you compare it to other splitters in the league, but the splitter in general is kind of becoming a better pitch in the majors. And otherwise, he still throws a 4-seam fastball at 97 with good induced vertical break. He'll throw a slider in there from time to time. And again, he has stayed healthy. He's a good setup man with seemingly more to unlock, right? All that time with the Nats and then 1.5 season with the Tigers. Imagine him in a good pitching development program for an entire big league season. If he signs with the Orioles, it could get even better than it did, or at least for a longer stretch than it did down the stretch with the Tigers. And the best part is, if you also sign a closer and that guy struggles or goes down, like Kyle Finnegan does have 112 career big league saves. So he could step in and do that if you needed him to, but he would also be a really good late inning guy. And again, with that splitter, it allows him to get righties and lefties out, which makes him even more valuable at the end of the game. Number 3 on the list, we know him well. That is Seranthony Dominguez. So actually, as I'm recording here on Tuesday, happy birthday to Dominguez, who turned 31 on November 25th, projected for a 2-year, $16 million free agent contract. We know him well. He came over to the Orioles from the Phillies at the 24 deadline. They traded him over to the Blue Jays at the 25 deadline. He was kind of part of the high leverage circle of trust for the Blue Jays as they made it all the way to Game 7 of the World Series this year. And we know that that splitter that he added this year with the Orioles really changed his game. It was a 114 batting average against it, a 50% swing and miss rate. But weirdly, the Blue Jays actually had him throw that splitter less, which was a little odd. Now, he was still a good pitcher, right? He was still throwing fastballs at 98. He was still throwing the really good sweeper that nobody can hit and had a 50% swing and miss rate as well and a 132 batting average and was just dominant against righties. But the splitter gave him a dominant pitch against lefties and presumably should have allowed him to dominate both sides. But I don't know why the Blue Jays just kind of pulled him off of that splitter usage a little bit. I think if the Orioles got him back, they dial back up that splitter. It's just really good stuff. He's still throwing 98. He's still got some of the highest swing and miss rates in baseball. Obviously, the issue with Seranthony Dominguez is, even though the stuff is great, had a 114 stuff plus this year, it's the walk rates. It's one of the worst walk rates in all of baseball. It sat up at, 13.8% this year. That is not good at all. If he could just get his walk rate down to like 9 or 10%, this would be one of the better relievers in the league. The reason he's not is because he's walking 14% of batters. You have to have elite stuff, which is what Dominguez has, to sustain as a good big league reliever and walk 14% of batters. If his stuff falls off and his command stays the same, he's going to be a middle reliever at best. So that is what you worry about. And the Orioles had him for a year, and they know that. But if he can cut the walks at all, you've got a legitimate back-end piece. The other issue is the walks didn't get better. In fact, they got slightly worse once he was traded to Toronto. Now, the good part is this was by far a career high walk rate at 13.8% this year, right? Like in 2024, in his time split between the Phillies and the Orioles, he had an 8.2% walk rate. If he can run an 8.2, well, now you're back to the very trustworthy, very good Seranthony Dominguez with this up stuff with the sweeper and the splitter that he never really had to that level when he was in Philadelphia. You combine those two things, well, you've got a lockdown elite reliever again. He could be higher, but again, we know he has a little bit of a home run problem. We know that the Orioles kind of know him well, and we know, again, the walk rate was very concerning. If he can get that down, he's probably a better candidate than number 3 on this list. But as I mentioned yesterday and today, I know it would be disappointing to kind of run it back, but I would not be disappointed after the Orioles retraded for Kittredge if they then signed Gregory Soto and Seranthony Dominguez in free agency. Those are good relievers that made up a good bullpen. Just bad luck and things didn't work out this year and they got traded. Wouldn't be a bad job if they brought those guys back. It'd be odd. I don't think it would really happen to that extent, but those are good pitchers who would help your team. But he's still at number 3 on the list because I think there are 2 options that are better. One guy who just got converted to the bullpen and broke out in 2025, and one guy who's been a reliever forever, and I would just be ecstatic if the Orioles signed this guy because he is my favorite relief pitcher in baseball. Darren O'Day 2.0, but maybe better. We'll talk about the top 2 on the list coming up next. But first, this episode of the Locked On Orioles podcast is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NBA is back, and there is no better place to get in on the action than FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Even if you miss the start of the game or you want to ride the hot hand, FanDuel has live bets on everything from who will score next to fourth quarter comebacks. Plus, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay for a shot at a bigger payout. It keeps every game exciting, especially when your team is making that late push. And right now, FanDuel is giving new customers $300 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So head to FanDuel.com to sign up and play your game with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. So we move into the top 2 on my list of, or my wish list, I should say, of free agent right-handed relievers. This is part 1 of 2. Part 1, we are focusing on the high leverage guys, the setup men, the ones who have proven to do it in that role and could hopefully step in and just kind of dominate at the back end of the game for you. And number 2 on my list is Brad Keller. Brad Keller, 30-year-old right-hander, 6'5", big guy out there on the mound, projected to get a 2-year, $22 million contract this offseason. Keller, who finally had his breakout year as a relief pitcher with the Chicago Cubs in 2025. Keller first came up in 2018 with the Royals, and really for 5 years, he was just kind of a bad starting pitcher for Kansas City from 2018 to 22. He was running like 5 ERAs and 4 ERAs. He was a former well-regarded prospect. He was an 8th-round pick who kind of pulled it together, but just didn't have it. Kind of lost his role a little bit in 2023. Then you go to 24, he starts to bounce around with the White Sox as a starter, and then he goes to Boston, and he's used as a reliever. And it was mostly in multi-inning outings, kind of a long relief guy. He threw 11 appearances in 24 and 2/3 innings, and it wasn't anything special. It was a 5.84 ERA. It was a low strikeout rate. It wasn't a super low walk rate. The ground ball rate was lower. It was nothing that made you say, oh, like the Red Sox turned him into a reliever. Let's go. But there were just little flashes in Boston, right? Again, overall, stats didn't look good, but there were little things that you would see. And he pitched a couple of times against the Orioles in that role with the Red Sox, where you would look at him and you would say, like this is a little different from what we used to see from Keller, right? This slider looks a little different, or this four-seam fastball is playing a little differently. And then all of a sudden, the Cubs, they must have seen some of that. And they go and sign him, and he was just elite. He was just elite. 68 games, 69 and 2/3 innings, 2.07 ERA, 2.93 FIP, 27% K rate to an 8% walk rate. Opponents hit just 181. He went out there and just dominated. The four-seamer went from 94 as a starter to 97 as a reliever. Now, it doesn't get a ton of swing and miss because it doesn't have a lot of that riding action, but he's able to throw it for strikes whenever he wants, and it has good velocity. His slider looked better. His sweeper was ridiculous. He still had that changeup he'd toss in there from time to time to get a lot of swing and miss against lefties as well. Guys really could not square him up. At 30.6%, he had one of the 5 lowest hard hit rates against any reliever this year. That ran with a 57% ground ball rate in the top 10 in baseball. It's like super, super low contact rates against him, low barrel rates. Just nobody squared him up. He was awesome. Now, there's nothing like insanely elite about his game or one pitch that you look at and like, this is one of the best in baseball. The slider, though, is pretty good. The sweeper slider combo. It's a 103 stuff plus. It was, he had never had higher than a 93. So it was much better stuff coming out of the bullpen in Chicago this year. You can see why he got so much better. And you look at the Baseball Savant page and it's like everything is red. He's got a 5-pitch mix. Some teams were reportedly interested in turning him back into a starter if they sign him as a free agent, kind of similar to what we talked about with Luke Weaver, because Keller even more recently has been a starting pitcher and still has that 5-pitch mix. So that could be intriguing for the Orioles, but that slider's got the big vertical movement on it. It's got the 3rd best stuff plus by any slider from a reliever in baseball in 2025. Like, the stuff is there. The question is just, can he maintain this after only 1 year? And the other question is, like, does he want to be a starter? And is that what he'll be signed for, which could make him command more money in free agency and take the Orioles out of it? Not that they wouldn't pay the money, but maybe they're just more interested in him as a reliever and other teams want him as a starter. But as good as he was this year, it'd be worth it to take a look at Brad Keller. But Brad Keller, to me, pales in comparison to the number 1 player on my list. I think, now, realistically, if the Orioles signed one of the top starters, the Frombers, the Dylan Ceases, the Michael Kings, yes, of course, I would be incredibly happy. But no other free agent that the Orioles could sign this offseason would make me more just like personally excited that if the Orioles signed Tyler Rogers, who is number 1 on my list. Rogers, who's 34 years old, he will be 35 in December, is projected for a 2-year, $21 million contract in free agency. Tyler Rogers, straight up, has been one of the best relief pitchers in baseball for the last 5 seasons. And despite being almost 35 years old, this is his first time hitting free agency because he didn't debut with the Giants until he was 28 years old back in 2019, stayed with the Giants forever, was traded to the Mets at the deadline this year, and then hits free agency for the first time. So he's going to try to cash in as best he can at 35, but I don't think the age matters because Tyler Rogers is the legitimate second coming of Darren O'Day, but it's actually better. It is the fully underhand submarine delivery, and it produces just ridiculous results. This year, between the Giants and the Mets, He had a 1.98 ERA, a career best with a 2.88 FIP, and he threw 77 1/3 innings. That's the most he's thrown since 2021 with the Giants. He appeared in 81 games. Because of the arm angle, it actually makes him a little more available and less stress on his arm as well. He got a little worse with the Mets, like the ERA jumped to 2.30 and the strikeouts went down, but he was still great in his 28 appearances for New York after the trade. He certainly was not the reason that the Mets ended up missing the playoffs. Probably their other trade for a reliever, Ryan Helsley, played a lot bigger factor into that. And if you're looking for strikeouts, what the Orioles should be at the back end, Rogers is not your guy. It is just a 16.1% strikeout rate. That is one of the lowest in baseball for any high leverage reliever. And that's a number that's going down, right? It was 19% in 2023, 18% in 24, down to 16%. But he doesn't walk anyone. A 2.3% walk rate is absurd. That is absurd. He's not getting any swing and miss. He's got the lowest whiff rate. He's got the lowest fastball velocity. His sinker sits at 84 miles an hour. But it's about the deception. It's about the best walk rate in baseball among relievers. It's about the 2.1% barrel rate, lowest among any reliever. It's about the 33% hard hit rate, one of the lowest. It's about the 62% ground ball rate, top 5 lowest. It's about the 86 mile per hour average exit velocity against him, one of the lowest in baseball. He gets good chase. He gets a lot of chase out of the zone as well, which leads to even softer contact. It's 2 pitches. It's 75% sinkers that are just impossible to hit from that vantage point. And then it's 25% sliders, which he throws around 74 miles an hour and have that weird kind of almost upward break. Remember that Darren O'Day used to throw in an Orioles uniform from that submarine slot. It just makes him impossible. And sometimes these guys can be just unhittable against righties, but can have some issues against lefties. Like Darren O'Day even used to give up home runs from time to time against lefties because if they could see that slider well, they could time it and they could hit it out of the ballpark. Righties hit 229, lefties hit 230 against Tyler Rogers. Like lefties overall, you look at all the stats, are a little bit better against him, which is to be expected, but it's not any kind of huge issue. From 2021 to 2025, 5 seasons, 2.71 ERA, 4% walk rate, 56% ground ball rate. He's thrown at least 70 innings in all 5 of those seasons. He's the most dependable, reliable, and durable reliever. He's also 13th in ERA since 2021 among big league relievers who've thrown at least 200 innings. Like he's durable and he's awesome. And it's not the same kind of awesome. It's not the dominant 30+% strikeout rate, blow you away kind of awesome that a lot of these other relievers that I've talked about are in this episode. And he can hurt you at times, right? Because it's a ton of balls in play. It's one of the lower swing and miss rates. It's one of the lower strikeout rates. He relies on contact, but getting soft contact, soft grounders and pop-ups and lazy fly balls is what Tyler Rogers lives on. But at times he can get BABIP to death, right? Bloop singles, grounders that are infield hits. They sneak through the right side. They fall in down the line. And that can hurt you because sometimes you just need a strikeout, right? And that is sometimes where Rogers can backfire. And that's why he's not like the greatest reliever in baseball, because at the end of the day, strikeouts are going to be better than giving up contact. And that is the big difference between a guy like Rogers and a guy like Darren O'Day, right? You go back to kind of the peak years of O'Day in the mid 2010s in the Orioles bullpen. And you see some of these years like 2012, when he broke onto the scene, he was running a 26% strikeout rate, Rogers at 16. In his best years, with the Orioles, he was running close to 30% K rates to go along with low walk rates. Darren O'Day, when he was humming, was also striking guys out, but he was more susceptible to hard contact, more susceptible to home runs, more susceptible to lefties being good against him. Rogers has kind of gone the other directions. It's a similar delivery, but he's traded an ability probably to get more strikeouts and more swing and miss than he does to get even softer contact and say, hey, I'll be fine if I give up a couple of weird singles and it hurts me and I give up some runs in a big spot. But I know over a full season, my ERA is going to be lower than pretty much anyone else's because I just don't give up hard contact. I don't give up the long ball. And at the end of the day, that's going to work out for me. And it does. The guy threw 77 1/3 innings and he gave up 4 home runs last year. And again, the command's good. And it's not like, it's wild. He walked 7 batters and hit 1 Again, in 81 appearances, he's not going to let free guys on base. So if he ever does give up a couple of hits or does give up a home run, it's going to take teams stringing those hits together to get runs because he's not going to let you freely on base. 2 years, 30 million, whatever it would take, I would pay it to Tyler Rogers because I just want to see that delivery. And I know that it would just be really, really fun to watch. And who knows, right? He's going to be 35. Maybe he could regress a little bit. That's possible. It's just been so good for so long. And with that kind of delivery, I think he can be good pushing towards 40 years old and beyond. I think he's got a lot of good years ahead of him. And hopefully those will come in an Orioles uniform. But that'll do it for today's episode. Let me know here in the YouTube comments, where you would have changed some of these names or what names you would have had on the list that weren't on this top 6. Remember, I'll get to some more middle relief, interesting righty types on another episode next week. And that's when we'll be back on the podcast, right? We'll be into December, continue to do some of these free agent wish lists. We'll talk about the other righty relievers. And of course, we'll talk about starting pitchers, the top line guys who I want the Orioles to get the most. And then those like number 3-ish starters. You always probably want to add one of those as well. Who are the best ones out there in free agency? That's coming up next week on the show, starting on Monday. Until then, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to the Locked On Orioles YouTube channel. Make sure to subscribe or follow wherever you listen. If you can leave a 5-star rating and a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that really helps out the show. And if you have Orioles thoughts, questions, you want to give feedback on the podcast, whatever it may be, always happy to chat over at lockedonorioles@gmail.com. Again, back on Monday, unless, of course, there's a big Orioles news over the weekend that we got to do a live episode for, maybe a big signing, but either way, there will be a show on Monday, and we'll be a week away from the winter meetings. Until then, I'm Connor Newcomb, and this has been the Locked On Orioles podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.